Good morning. It's great to be here. One, of course, I really love coming here and meeting the most talented, established leaders of the biotech industry. But also, it's great to be away from the East Coast when it's, you look at the weather here, and perhaps the timing was perfect this time. Well, this morning, at least half of you used AI, and maybe without realizing it. Maybe you unlocked your phone with facial recognition. Maybe you used suggested text to start an email response. Maybe your ride share to the conference matched you with a driver and determined the ideal price, whatever it is. Everything using AI, right? Well, the fact of the matter is that AI's disruptive potential is growing exponentially. We all know that. In our everyday lives, and also in our companies. And a recent McKinsey research findings suggested that almost 80% of the companies in the US and even in Europe are already using generative AI. Well, if you look at healthcare, our results are profound. Earlier this year, Northeastern University patented AI to generate the biodegradable elastic hydrogels to 3D print the living tissue. There is an university known as Tsinghua in China. They have launched the Agent Hospital. That's a virtual, fully AI-powered medical facility, and that trains agents in diagnostics and advanced clinical AI. IBM Watson is reinventing itself, and they're specializing now in oncology cancers. In oncology, where they're analyzing cancer cases against the enormity of the medical literature, clinical trial data, and the treatment guidelines, so that they can create personalized therapy options. So none of this is truly new, and the biopharma manufacturing is quickly embracing AI. Now, our exploration of the generative AI tools in the past has already redefined, and many of the companies are already using it, as to how we compose the CMC filings, how we update SOPs, how we analyze process data, and so on. But my point is, that's just the starting point of AI. It's sort of table stakes. As the technology transforms our lives and businesses, I'm sure you'll agree that it's evolving and improving itself. And we see a lot of hints of the AI-enabled future on the horizon. And to that extent, in biomanufacturing, it's only logical to assume that the possibilities could be mind-blowing. In fact, my personal thesis is that some of the basic concepts that we talked about for a long period of time, like robust supply, compliant supply, right first time, commercialization to reduce the speed to market, all of these things are going to change. CMC being on the critical path and not clinical, when you get extremely good results from clinical, when an accelerated review takes place by FDA. So many of these things, according to me, are going to look very different in the future. Now, the pathway to this future, according to me, and which is what the topic is for today, is agentic AI. Autonomous tools are going to efficiently and independently, important word, efficiently and independently perform the actions we assign, backed by knowledge-based reasoning. And that will help us to reimagine what is possible for us to do in manufacturing. In an agentic-based world, the institutional knowledge will be secured in intelligent entities, and that will create an archive of data to continuously learn from. And the agents we design are going to break down silos, and they are going to expand our understanding of systems and processes. Be it predictive maintenance, be it advanced diagnostics, be it prognostics. Anything that is necessary to know from a performance of the process in real time will be easily achievable. And therefore, I think some companies will create a label 10 years from now that this is my 100% right first time facility. There'll be new kind of descriptors to show what a manufacturing site looks like in the future, not defined by the billions of dollars that you spend, but by suggesting that these sites are fundamentally different. And I would also posit that when we do that from a profit and loss perspective, which matters a lot in the world of tomorrow, given where we are headed, regardless of MFN and tariffs, that because of these dynamic agents that we'll be deploying, we should be 50% better than what we do. What I mean by that, from a P&L perspective, is it should be 50% faster, 50% more productive, and we should be able to achieve all of that with 50% less. And for that, I think the future starts now. Now, before we go any further, let's try to understand what is agentic AI. Well, we have experienced the traditional AI, to answer and reason. That's the generative AI of a ChatGPT search or, sort of the document authoring tools. But then we also know that has a limitation, because fundamentally, it must begin with a human-defined hypothesis, right? Now, with agentic AI, we add the capabilities, the critical capabilities to perceive, reason, act, and learn. You add that. And then it becomes an invaluable tool in the workflows and takes over all the low-value risks. In fact, when McKinsey did their search to understand what kind of activities can go into agentic AI, they found almost 75 to 85% of what we do routinely in terms of our workflows can be either enhanced or automated completely by the agents. And the fun is that these dynamic AI agents do not act alone. Instead, these agents orchestrate an ecosystem of models, data, documents, and other resources to act in real time with an unprecedented autonomy if we design them that way. On the manufacturing line, you can see an agent gathering and decoding information from its environment, such as the databases and sensors. It can use a large language model, LLM, or as its brain to plan and accomplish its assigned goal within predefined parameters. It could be anything. It could be monitoring of quality trends. It could be managing raw material supply, whatever that is. But then from there, what the agent will do, it will learn and evolve, continuously evolving, continuously improving in part because of the human feedback that it gets continuously. And then you will find that these tools that we have are not static. The tools that I used yesterday are different than the tools that I use today, and the tools that I use tomorrow are different than the tools that I've used today. And that growth of the capability of the tools is a very important defining feature of the agentic AI. Just to quote an example, just imagine for a second that you are embedding the agent in a digital twin, which is using the measurements from the actuators in a fermentation process and continuously running high-level calculations and multi-step workflows to optimize it real time, whether it's cell growth, cell quality, whatever. You don't have to You don't have to worry about it, including the troubleshooting, because it's being done. And to that extent, part of it is already there, but then my point is that is just the beginning. So to illustrate what I'm trying to say, I will take a few areas which are very important for us. A good part of our life is spent in managing deviations, investigations, trying to understand how we stage it in front of inspectors, trying to understand the go, no-go decisions based on those deviations. So the question I asked myself, is it possible to shoot for 0 deviations because of agentic AI? Well, the answer is, well, if we deploy continuous monitoring, if we deploy structured reasoning, if we deploy closed-loop learning, I think it may not be a wishful thinking. All of us know that when the batch releases get stuck in the month-long investigations, the deviations which are, sometimes often add 30 to 40 or 50 days because the reviews are very manual, records are very fragmented, and we know that between manufacturing, quality, and tech ops, bias always creeps in because of the disconnected systems. But according to me, the agentic systems can change all of that. The streaming analytics will watch the real-time signals, be it online spectroscopy, be it particle counts, be it microbial indicators, be it equipment logs, all of that. And simultaneously, another group of agents will classify and triage the issues the moment they appear using clear rules and learned patterns. And then the nature of the root cause analysis will also change. They'll become flexible, they'll become digital, and adaptive intelligence is going to apply causal inference and graph-based knowledge models to propose hypotheses, then run what-if simulations against those process models and historical cohorts to isolate the true causes, quantify the likelihood, and estimate the impact. And according to me, this work that I just said is going to work because fundamentally, the foundation of data is much, much stronger. When you harmonize production lab, quality records, all of those things with shared models and lineage, then what happens is the whole context of materials, equipment state, operator action, environment, all of that data, they kind of travel with the data end to end. And then the task-driven agents pull in the process histories, the lab analytics, the manufacturing documentation, the external safety alerts, all of that to build a much richer evidence trail. And that, again, gets smarter with every run. So for every deviation, the prescriptive agents will draft kappa, and that will be mapped to your company procedure, to your global procedure that you want to have across the network or the site, depending on how big is your network. And then you will set the clear parameter limits and the verification steps, the owners, the timelines, all of that. And while that is happening, there's a parallel agent that is also continuously writing the outcomes back into a living knowledge base. And both will be happening almost at the same time. So therefore, I think the whole concept of repeat deviations, which is always kind of a big weak spot for us, may look fundamentally different in terms of the frequency in the future, because the earlier wins that happens, kind of detect and eliminate the failure modes through the targeted changes that we do to the methods and controls almost autonomously or semi-autonomously. And that basically is the reasoning why I am confident that from a productivity point of view, we should expect at least a 30% increase, because these agents are going to automate checks, they're going to pre-populate investigation narratives, they're going to produce traceable reports, they're going to shrink the whole time from detection to disposition. The other thing that I feel sometimes a little bit frustrated when I see deviations and investigations and all of that is how much are we seeing around the corner? Well, I think because of the agentic AI, the pattern-seeking intelligence can start flagging the emerging chemistries, the degradation pathways much faster. I often talk about the nitrosamine, formation issue that took such a huge amount of both manufacturing, process development, and analytical time. Is it possible that through early anomaly signals and through mechanistic events, we turn these kind of potential surprises into proactive interventions, which should not be as difficult in the future as it was in the past? Now, the area that I am more focused on in trying to understand what the world looks like in the future for biomanufacturing is the area of commercialization of new products, because we're constantly driving for speed to market by drastically reducing development cycles. And sometimes it's tough. We have already been on record in the public domain about Merck that if we have 80+ phase 3 studies, and if you're launching 20+ new products in the 5 years, then how will we manage our resources? How will we manage our speed of commercialization? Which one to do first, which one to do second? So all of these things are important. But then, very quickly, I tell my team that much of our time, much of our resources in Merck, they go into heuristics. We're constantly trying to crack tough technical problems with experiments, assumptions, continuously. So what if agentic AI reinvents the whole concept of process development at the heart of our work and says, no, it's not going to be trial and error in future. I'm going to guide your decision-making process. And why is it important? Because you are dealing with certainly a huge number of complex modalities all coming to you at once. On the one hand, the macrocyclic peptides are straining your solid phase synthesis, and you're lucky if it has very few chiral centers, which is not always true. The whole concept of purification becomes massively complicated. The high potency compounds need tight containment and precise dosing. The RNA medicines demand very careful enzymatic steps and finely tuned lipid nanoparticle formulation. So these are not easy things. The advantage of the agentic AI system is I can tell them that go scout options. Compare the continuous flow chemistry with a batch process. Recommend a smarter biocatalysis. Go configure multi-column chromatography. Go build digital models that can cleanly translate from the lab to the plant. And give me options. So what I'm trying to say is that when we deploy these agentic systems, we are shifting from designing, building, and testing through multiple costly runs to adaptive experimental design and learning-based optimization, using online spectroscopy, multivariate monitoring, all of that to map the design space and prove the robustness much before we are starting to lock in the equipment and the layouts and the process. So looking ahead, the agentic intelligence lets us test before we build. That's the important point. Test before you build. It can run physics-informed models, digital twins of reactors, filtration, chromatography, all of that. It can simulate all the scale-up effects of mixing and mass transfer. It can propose control strategies. It can optimize critical process parameters, quality attributes, all of that. But then it will do that with a clear, traceable human oversight, which we can further improve on. And this shift can trim development cycles. I don't know whether it's 30%, 40%, 50%, but I know that as these agentic systems learn, we can have the timelines. And when I say timeline, I mean discovery to first in patient, and then from first in patient to phase 2B, and from phase 2B to registration. These timelines, which make CMC on the critical path, especially in some compounds, not necessarily in long cardiovascular trials, not necessarily in those kind of trials, but sometimes in oncology, when it moves from phase 1 to phase 3 very fast. And on top of the fact that it's a BD, which basically means you can't change necessarily the source overnight because speed to market matters to you. So how do you handle those kind of situations in the future? And I think those are the ones which will look a lot different if you are able to use it properly. So basically my point to you guys is that agentic knowledge-based tools will help us assemble technical dossiers. It will help us link raw material, raw data to conclusions. It will draft regular-ready responses. It will do it so much more quickly, so much more transparently. And just imagine for a moment that you're combining all of this with a very flexible, automated facility which uses modular single-use equipment, which uses electronic batch records, which uses closed-loop control already. Then you are able to turbocharge the entire process development and everything around it. And that, I'm quite sure, is going to lower cost, speed timeline, and make medicines, kind of reach the patients much faster. And to that extent, I have a claim to make that the agentic AI is going to be much more patient-centric AI. Now, a question that always comes up in everybody's mind, well, if you are really speeding up commercialization, transformation, what happens to tech transfer? What does it look? Well, according to me, once you have these winning processes, you do not need the normal slog that we always have to bring it to full scale. According to me, if it's 2 to 3 years, it should be less than 1 year. That basically means instead of spending 18 months wrestling with transfer, validation, all of that work, the multi-system agentic tools is going to definitely help us all the regulatory documentation, paperwork, proof, and all that. It can auto-assemble all the protocols or the reports, push them into structured submission-ready files in days, and it can kind of reshape how we handle the PPQ, the process performance qualification batches in the project. I mean, those kind of things, which take an enormous amount of time, can definitely look way, way different in the future. And then, if we are building our operations fundamentally on high-quality, traceable data, then these agents can reason and simulate. They can kind of model the optimum number of qualification batches. They can test on their own autonomously the different control strategies. They'll tell us what the risk quantification is. So there's no more guesswork anymore in defining how we want to define process robustness and process reliability. And as this transfers speed up, what we are trying to do is we're trying to become more agile. When there is a geopolitical disruption, when there is a reroute of manufacturing, when we are talking about strengthening our supply chain, all of these things, according to me, will become much handy, because right now these things are at the core of the constraint in terms of agility. The other point, of course, is that even it is beyond biopharma, because if you look at the construction partners, they don't use agentic tools, frankly, right now. They don't predict and prevent failure points. They don't optimize schedules and materials. So according to me, it's going to be not just the ones who are doing the manufacturing, but all of us together in our ecosystem. And if you put it all together, I think we are going to see a practical revolution from a life cycle, from a time cycle point of view, where there's tech transfer, validation, and all of that, and that will look different. And if we do all of that, deviations, and then tech transfer and commercialization differently, then my point is that we can declare rather boldly how the right first time will look like at an end-to-end basis to impact patients. Now, we know that at the end of it all, you don't get right first time if there's no rigor. Now, in agentic AI, you can pair a digital agent with a clear rule-based good manufacturing practice kind of a process and procedure, and then you can allow them to always kind of act as oversight partners. They can monitor, they can cross-check, they can investigate with perfect recall, because there's no limitation to their memory. So all the routine risks that we always worry about, that somebody's forgetting, somebody's neglecting, all of these things are designed out. And those critical steps are being defined, executed with precision. And the other thing that happens often, and I don't know whether you have experienced it, there's a lot of biased decision making that I see happening in the investigation, in the root cause analysis. And the unbiased decision making then become a true North Star. The agents can draw on a broad, well-curated knowledge base and the deep historical data that's already available across products, sites, and processes. And they will surface the patterns, they will flag the weak signals, they will recommend the actions without human bias, and therefore I think zero deviation and right first time has a much better chance in the world of tomorrow than today. And believe me, if you have a situation where your models are already validated against rich process data and continuous verification, why do you need the traditional process performance qualification batches? Why? Why can't we say that the digital evidence of control, the digital evidence of robustness, the digital evidence of reproducibility is so strong that that is much richer data than a small set of physical runs? Now, the question is that realistic? From a regulatory perspective, when I talk to some of the FDA subject matter experts, I'm not claiming victory before it is earned, and I know that it's going to be slow, but I think they're going to get there because they're realizing some of the same things that we are realizing. Of course, there's always a lag effect between how we industry think and the regulators think for the right reasons, because they're there to save the patient's interest more than anything else. But I'm seeing all of these things are happening, and therefore I'm a lot more ambitious. Now, when you say all of that, I want to also say that is it time for us to be so confident about the future that we are going to hand over the reins to these agents? I'm not saying so. But I think a world is evolving where we can show that there are supervised models where agents can execute checks, simulate outcomes, and propose the next steps, while we'll also have accountable experts will review. And that dual role is going to evolve between now and 2030 and mature between 2030 and 35. Because even the regulators are understanding that the regulatory compliance becomes a lot easier in the future. When I was talking with them recently, and I told them that the generative tools are already, right now, compiling filings. Now, when we move from the generative AI to the agentic AI, we could move towards continuous transparency, where FDA or EMA can observe, secure, real-time operational data with their own agents. And instead of episodic submission, the regulatory compliance then becomes a live view of process control, data integrity, and product quality on a real-time basis. Now, I know I'm painting a picture which is far, far too distant, because we all know the imperfections of our system today. But then, at this point of time, as a keynote speaker, I'm trying to be overambitious. So basically, I'm trying to say that many of these things will look very different, and I, like you all, draw my inspiration about all of these things could mean a lot from a patient impact. I mean, if we have a fully compliant supply, if we have faster cycles, if we have lower development costs, then I think we are giving the best science to patients without being constrained by what we can scale efficiently, which has always been a problem. So according to me, many of these things are going to happen very differently, especially in complex molecules, whether it's a macrocyclic peptide, whether it's an antibody-drug conjugate, bispecific antibody, and all of these new modalities, the cell and gene therapy. I mean, I told the other day, in the world of agentic AI, will autologous platform be that disadvantageous to allogenic platform, where n equal to 1 is looked at differently than n equal to 100. So many of these questions that we didn't answer properly, could we answer differently in the world of agentic AI? I think the formulations are going to evolve too. You know, innovators today are already using digital technologies and 3D printing for oral precision medicines. We know that, right? Now, it is also possible that a decade from now, the agents will tell us, well, this is the right formulation for this is the right device. The device to formulation match, we don't have to do. Similarly, they will say, well, why aren't you going multiple dosages? Why are you going for unique dosage? Why can't you go for a customized delivery option? Many of these things, I think, is going to happen. So process development and tech transfer for n equal to 1 are not going to take as long as it's going to take, and that will make a lot of the rare disease different, and a lot of the experiments that we do in terms of narrow patient populations will become a lot easier. Now, I'm not trying to tell you the clinical costs are coming down. That perhaps is a much bigger cost than CMC cost. But I'm seeing on the CMC front, they are going to look very different in terms of a reimagined supply chain. So can we make this future a reality? Well, I know all of you are thinking, like I thought, that this vision will always raise questions. When are you going to keep the humans in the loop? How are you going to handle the workforce shifts? How are you going to address the environmental impact? Now, my point is that we are going to implement AI or agentic AI the right way. It has to be humanity that has to lead the digital revolution. It has to be humanity which has to decide where agents help and how they unlock our potential. And to that extent, even in an AI-rich future, according to me, agents are nothing more than just tools, and they are not the point. And our products, touch our lives. So it's only natural that we are going to be very cautious in our approach, and we should deploy agentic systems carefully with very, very, very clear goals. And we cannot do it alone. We need industry standards for data and compliance. We need partnerships with the ones who are shaping our future, because that expertise becomes very, very important so that we are not losing our patient focus. But the other thing also is data. We need much, much more smarter data sharing. The strong models that I talked about, they depend on broad, high-quality data across companies and just not single sites. And that's very tricky in pharmaceutical world because we live in a world of proprietary knowledge. I'm talking about a different solution. Let's have one path where we do not share raw data, but we share our agents. Yes, we don't share our data, but we share our agents. In a distributed learning approach, the models travel to the data. The data does not travel to the models. And the models learn from metadata, and the models learn how to keep information private. It's no different than the way contract manufacturers make products for us. And the reason is that with a wider view, we can spot through agentic AI the industry-wide quality risk before it spreads. And that's the kind of advantage you get. And frankly speaking, all of these things have to be done in a manner that it adds value. It doesn't necessarily mean where you can get a simple solution, you're using agentic AI, and that's a waste of agentic AI. So you can deploy the quality by design mindset, by using the agents and that human oversight, that clear control, that auditability, the validation, all of those things are possible in the world of agentic AI with the people embedded in the loop. And my point is that all of these things are doable in the world of tomorrow. So let me close by saying that I'm encouraging you all to meet the future with curiosity and not fear. And let's remember, whenever we do something like what we're talking about in agentic AI, which is of the patient, by the patient, for the patient, in that world we live in, we have to set the guardrails. I also would like to say that today, what is odd in terms of agentic AI, that could spark tomorrow's breakthrough. I also think that the agents we design today are going to shape what's going to happen tomorrow. And therefore, as the topic suggests, I think the journey between now and 2030 will be very different. And the maturing will take place between 2030 and 35. And by the end of 2035, my thinking, my vision, my understanding and my sense is that we are likely to exceed our imagination, where the innovation of AI built on the current foundation of our industry will elevate healthcare, and that will improve patient lives. Thank you all very much.